Lyle Crocodile, which was that and Mike Mulligan were the two that were my kids' favorites out of all these books. But Lyle was, how many times does a crocodile live in a human family with a human family and just be so gentle and meek, which then, again, brings us back to Wilbur and, that gentleness, that humility that really you shouldn't find in a crocodile.
Right.
Rachenka's eggs, same thing, that goose that she healed, that was her pet and it had its home with her, but she knew it was a wild animal and it needed to go. Right. And so she had to free her pet. And, it's beautiful because the goose leaves her an egg, which hatches to be a new pet.
That's right.
So it's a beautiful.
But there's a cycle there, right?
It is a cycle, but she did have to let it go. And that's a theme we're going to see over and over throughout literature, is having to let something that you love first be itself and then and let it have the freedom to go and do what it needs to do, like our children.
Well, and so we're going to see.
We eventually have to give them the freedom.
I don't know about you, but I could really go for some biscuits and coffee right about now. It's Ian again, here to thank you for supporting our show. If you're new to the world of Memoria Press, welcome. We're glad you're here. If you're looking for more great shows about homeschooling, literature, classical education, and more, you're in the right spot. So go ahead and subscribe by clicking right up there to get connected today. Thanks for being here. Now let's get back to the episode. We're going to see danger as it really is. We're going to see essence, what things are. What about home? Where do you guys see houses and homes being a major theme?
There seems to be a lot of that in these.
I mean,
in these books.
And it resonates so much with children. Mm-hmm. Just what it means to feel at home, not just what a home looks like, or but what and I think that these books are great in that way. And part of it, I don't even think Mike Mulligan kind of strikes me in that way, because it has really nothing to do with home. But at the end,
he finds a place.
He finds his place, right? He is where he is supposed to be. He has served his community well, and he is in an unexpected place where he belongs, right? And, I think that's, we talk about this in all of our books. Farmer Boy is a great example. The book is about, finding your calling. Like, where does Almanzo belong? And that's the struggle in the book. And these books kind of introduce you just to the feeling when you can finish a picture book like this and just have just sort of the contentment that this character is where they belong. That's just introducing that idea so that it resonates more in future books, I think.
And Mike Mulligan is also about progress.
It is.
It is about progress.
And that's a fascinating, I think, thing to teach students. And this, I think, resonates with, especially as students get older and they think about society and politics and culture. C.S. Lewis has a great statement in one of his books. I don't remember if it's Mere Christianity or maybe The Abolition of Man, but he talks about progress. And he talks about sometimes if progress is going the wrong way, the most progressive man is the one who turns around the soonest. Right. Now, Mike Mulligan isn't getting into that necessarily.
But he has become antiquated,
right? But he's become antiquated. And it's about finding place still, even when you are.
Right.
That's right.
Right. And, we in the grammar school books, there's a lot about progress. And so, and it relates, I think, to the distinction between city life and country life.
Right.
And, I think it goes to appreciation of the natural world and man's ability to control his circumstances, to what degree that's possible, and to what extent progress is good and meaningful, or what is at stake when we progress sometimes. And so, all of these ideas are you can begin to introduce, again, in not heavy ways, but
it's just part of reading contemplatively with the students and just stopping to point out the wildness of the goose and why she had to let her pet go. Just on that level, it takes a second. But just to read, instead of just reading straight through a book, which you want to do that too some, but really just to stop and talk about it, to talk about the illustrations, just to actually start teaching students to read more deeply and to think about what they've read and to stop. When you're reading something difficult, you have to stop and you have to think about it and you have to reread it several times. And
you have to have a pen in your hand and you have to look up into the air.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Yeah.
You really do.
We're not expecting that of a first grader, obviously.
But you want to build the habit of patience. I mean, I think that's the most important thing. You want to build the habit of patience because, I think just counter the modern era where everything happens quickly and every answer comes immediately. And, just give yourself space to think. Give yourself quiet time for thoughts. And I think that is kind of a countercultural thing to do. And I think that's why these books are so important because, so many kids are on, technology and, all the different things that are so fast. And books require patience and they require different skills.
And children naturally are contemplative.
Right.
I'm thinking back to when my 3-year-old, we were going to story hour at the library and we were late and he was always slow. And I get to the van, I open the door and he's not there. So I go back around and he's, that little toddler squat. He was squatted down and there was a roly-poly bug.
Oh, yes.
Moving at a roly-poly pace. And he was just fixated.
Right.
And that's how we want children to feel about books.
And they're going to ask questions that to us seem totally beside the point. But that's part of what we're trying to teach here. Like, they might ask a question, why this color?
Or they might ask the most important question.
And then suddenly they'll come out with another.
The most brilliant comment in the room. And so, I think that's.
What's that number 7 mean?
That's right. Why are there 7 fish here? 7 birds.
But if you give, people always say that they want their children to be readers, but you have to ignite that interest and that spark. And giving children books and just, teaching them to interact with them in a meaningful way is, I think, the beginning of that. And teaching that discernment. That's all we're trying to do here.
So what have you guys learned? When you look back at these books, when you read through these books, are there things that you learned that you want to share?
I think, I'm gonna mention this Why Mosquitoes Buzz in People's Ears, which I think is a great book. But these fables are really interesting. But I thought, is this something I'm actually learned? I don't know that I like information. But,
I don't think it has to be information. I think you can continue with that thematic feel, but even presented in such a way that like this affected me.
Well, okay. So something I talk about when we talk about books. So a line that I love in Treasure Island is cowardice is contagious. And, I don't know that it necessarily is a major, it is a little bit of a theme in that book, but the sentence itself resonates with me. Totally external from the story itself. And this Why Mosquitoes Buzz in People's Ears was interesting to me because you could kind of see that buildup of fear and worry and just sort of doubt and skepticism and even the sequencing of the book, which was kind of like the house that Jack built, right? Where they just sort of build and build and build. But at the very end, so it was the mosquito who annoyed the iguana, who frightened the python, who scared the rabbit, who startled the crow, who alarmed the monkey, who killed the owlet, right? And now Mother Owl won't wake the sun, right? And so it just sort of is
it's
that like
powerful,
right?
It's Persephone and Demeter.
So it's interesting. How I think insightful these books can be. With adult eyes.
We're going to talk later about Make Way for Ducklings, but even as I was reading that book, the way he changes verb tense at the very end, and he goes from this past narrative to a present tense, and the ducks live this way now. There's a sense of an ongoingness and a natural, you are now a part of their living and life. The way that some of these books are inviting young readers to participate in the stories, I think is fascinating to me as someone who's been away from them for so long, to come back and learn that no, they're teaching kids how to read And not only that, they're teaching kids what stories can do to you, how they can affect you, and so on and so forth.
Well, and you're in a unique spot too, because you genuinely have a preschool reader.
That's right.
And so you probably have even greater insights because, we've forgotten. Right?
and I'm going to have it. And so when I told, a second ago, I mentioned that kids sometimes ask questions that come out of left field. Sometimes when I'm reading to Hannah, she might ask a question or she might pause on something that, in my adult eyes that have become more pragmatic, I'm like, well, that doesn't matter. It's just what it is.
What's it matter? It just is.
What the author chose. But if I pause there and think it's what the author chose, then I realize, okay, there's maybe a purpose and a reason to these things.
Yeah. And it was something that struck your 4-year-old.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What I've learned is that I must not hate mice as much as I.
That's exactly right.
Some of my favorite books.
Yeah.
We haven't mentioned one I'd like to mention.
Go ahead.
Pickle chiffon pie.
Oh, yeah.
Which I don't think is Lee's favorite.
I like it.
Well, I will say that in reading it, I really resonated with this. And it's funny because generally you don't like fantasy, right?
I don't like fantasy.
Exactly.
Yes,
this is the...
So you just need to keep reading this more.
It is fantastic.
Yeah.
But it is also medieval. So it's another medieval book. It is a typical fairy tale.
Yeah.
It's silly, but typical fairy tale of the king is trying to find a husband for his daughter,
right?
The princess, and sends 3 princes off to find the best thing they can bring back, and whoever brings the best wins. And so it's that whole adventure. There are giants. There's there's all kinds of creatures that you see in all these Middle Ages stories.
That's right.
And in the end, the one that brings back nothing, because he has had compassion on everything that he thought could be brought back that would be wonderful. Look at that little guy. And so he says, I don't have anything to bring back, this is bringing me to The Empty Pot in 2nd grade too, which we'll talk about then. That's one of my favorite second grade books.
Pot's great.
So everyone was looking at him. They were whispering to the king. And then the king says, why didn't you bring anything back? And he tells him the story. And then the king says, you did bring something back. You brought back a story of kindness and love and consideration for others. Truly, in all caps, the most wonderful thing of all, you'll make a fine husband for my daughter. The king chose the perfect husband, the man of compassion and kindness, to be which we would all want for all of our children. And I just thought it was great. And again, an introduction to the Middle Ages fairy stories.
Well, and
I didn't want to ignore it.
Well, and it's like Millions of Cat, which I know is not your favorite. But
because all the cats kill each other.
That's harsh language. There is one cat that's brought home and adored, and it's the humble cat. It's the only cat.
Okay, read it.
They are all gone. They are all gone. So something happens.
Do I need to read that line to you about them killing each other?
I like to just focus on this one humble cat, like Wilbur, right? Who who gets to come home because this cat's the only one that doesn't claim to be the prettiest cat, right?
That's
it's
exactly
a very similar sort of ending, I think.
And I did write that down as one. It was a line that I loved, if I could find it, because it's beautiful. Because the cat says, when he says, "Why are you still here? Why didn't you get? Why didn't the others kill you?" And the kitten says, "I'm just a very homely little cat. So when you asked who was the prettiest, I didn't say anything, because the others were fighting over which of them was the prettiest. And this little humble kitten didn't say anything because she knew she wasn't the prettiest, or thought that she wasn't the prettiest." This is Fanny. In Mansfield Park.
Right. Yes.
We've been reading a lot of the same books lately. So
I think all these books, they have so much to offer us, even as adults, but especially to children. And in the way that we read these books, we're asking you, if you're following along in our curriculum, to read these books over the course of a week and kind of continue to go back and back to them. But they're beautiful books. I mean, the Inn Garden of Brother Theophane, his name really kind of means something like the manifestation or the appearance or some kind of divine incarnate sense of God in him. And I think you get to see a lot of the beauty of these books, especially in something as spiritual as that. But even in the silly, there's really a beauty and a joy to them to be found.
Yeah. Thanks, Ian.